The MMA Math prediction model is sitting at 11-2, with 2 big results since the last episode. Mackenzie Dern, after a few fun grappling exchanges, would pull off a slick armbar at the end of round 3 against the model's pick of Amanda Ribas, giving the model its second loss. And of course, at UFC 311, we saw Merab Dvalishvili put all the haters and like everyone in my comment section in their place, and proved again why experience against high-level competition is so vital to success in high-level MMA. As we mention often in this series, the MMA Math prediction model is not intended to be an accurate predictor of fights, it's merely an experiment of the MMA Math notion. And while there are glaring weaknesses if you were to look at this in terms of accuracy, the Merab Uma fight does highlight the strengths of the model, which is fundamentally who has had the best recent form against the best competition. And as this experiment goes on, I'm finding it interesting to see just how integral this factor is in predicting fights. Okay, so with the recap out of the way, let's turn our attention to the next event, and as always, the rules for the model are listed in the description below. In this episode, we are going to take a look at the main event of UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia, where number 2 ranked former 2-time middleweight champion Israel Adesanya will take on the number 5th ranked Nassourdine Imavov. On the surface of it, this is feeling like an appropriate challenge and a great matchup stylistically for Stylebender to get back on the bicycle. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's see what MMA Math has to say, starting with the French Dagestani contender, the sniper Nassourdine Imavov. 5 fights ago for Imavov takes us to the 14th of January 2023 for the main event of UFC Fight Night Strickland vs Imavov. In a light heavyweight bout where Imavov, ranked 12 in the middleweight division, would take on a short notice 7th ranked Sean Strickland. Unfortunately for Imavov, he would suffocate under a typical Strickland game plan, failing to break Sean's constant pressure and breach his defense. Imavov would have moments of success when switching up the tempo, but ultimately it wouldn't be enough and Strickland would be given the unanimous decision victory. As this fight didn't take place in the middleweight division, Imavov will lose 9 points. 4 fights ago takes us to the 10th of June 2023 for UFC 289 Nunes vs Aldana, where Imavov, now ranked 12th, would be put up against 14th ranked Chris Curtis. Unfortunately for both fighters, and especially Imavov, who was looking extremely crisp up to this point, the two fighters will come together in a clash of heads, opening a cut-up on Curtis that would ultimately stop the fight. The result was ruled a no contest, and although it feels unfair for Imavov, who was looking extremely good up to this point, 0 points will be awarded for this fight. 3 fights ago for Imavov takes us to the 3rd of February 2024 for the main event of UFC Fight Night, Dolidze vs Imavov, when 11th ranked Imavov would be put up against an 8th ranked Roman Dolidze. In another extremely unfortunate result for Imavov, you could have argued that he should have gotten the finish late in round 1, and in round 4, Imavov would land a head kick on Dolidze, who had one hand on the ground, which at this time and location was not considered a grounded opponent. Herb Dean would make the objectively wrong decision of breaking up the fight and deduct a point, which should have not happened under the unified rules. Imavov would still comfortably win the fight, but again get a horrid decision where one judge ruled this fight a draw, meaning he would only win by majority decision. A very unlucky stretch for Imavov, and he will gain 7 points for this victory, but likely got screwed out of a finish, and more points. 2 fights ago takes us to the 8th of June 2024 for the main event of UFC Fight Night Cannonier vs Imavov, where Imavov, ranked 7th, would take on number 4 ranked Jared Cannonier. With scorecards even heading into the 4th round, Imavov would rock Cannonier and follow up with a flurry of carefully placed shots. With luck finally tipping over to Imavov's favour, ref Jason Herzog would stop the fight pretty early, 1 minute and 34 seconds into the 4th round, and Imavov will gain 17 points. Imavov's last fight takes us to the 28th of September 2024 for the co-main event of UFC Fight Night Moicano vs Saint Denis, where now 4th ranked Imavov will take on 8th ranked Brendan Allen. In a great performance for Imavov, who has looked pretty impressive in his career but hasn't really had the chance to show off his skills in the UFC yet, he would lose the first round against Allen but comfortably adapt and completely neutralize the American over the next 2 rounds. Ultimately, Imavov would be given the unanimous decision victory and earned 8 points. I feel bad for Imavov, he definitely got screwed out of a handful of points, But hey, the rules are the rules. So with the Frenchman out of the way, let's move on to the former middleweight king who was going to lose 5 points straight off the bat as he is now 35 years old. 5 fights ago for Israel Adesanya takes us to the 2nd of July 2022 for the main event of UFC 276 Adesanya vs Cannonier, where Izzy, the then middleweight champion, would be looking to make his 6th defense of his title against the number 2 ranked contender Jared Cannonier. In a fairly standard performance during Izzy's title run, he would dominate Cannonier, outpointing him from the outside essentially bell to bell. Cannonier would have some success in round 3 which would snag him the round, but ultimately an easy victory for Izzy and he'll be given the unanimous decision victory and earn 14 points. 4 fights ago takes us to the 12th of November 2022 for UFC 281 Adesanya vs Pereira, where Izzy would be looking to make his 7th title defense against former kickboxing opponent and number 4th ranked Alex Pereira. Izzy would look amazing in this fight, entering the 5th round up 3 rounds to 1 on all judges' scorecards. Unfortunately for Izzy, however, he would be caught with a left hand against the cage and Pereira would chase the finish, ultimately getting a standing TKO 2 minutes and 1 second into the 5th, and Izzy will lose 10 points as well as the middleweight championship. 3 fights ago for Izzy takes us to the 8th of April 2023 for the main event of UFC 287 Pereira vs Adesanya 2, where Izzy would rematch Pereira for the middleweight strap. Almost the inverse of their first MMA fight, Izzy would get beaten to the punch for majority of the fight, succumbing much more to Pereira's forward pressure and failing to breach his forward defense. However, in the second, Izzy would find his opening and land a beautiful counter right, knocking out Pereira, regaining his middleweight title and also gaining 21 points. 2 fights ago takes us to the 9th of September 2023 for the main event of UFC 293 Adesanya vs Strickland, where Izzy would be looking to defend the middleweight strap for the first time in his second reign against 5th ranked Sean Strickland. If you've never seen Izzy kickbox, this would have been a very unexpected performance for Izzy, as he would get dropped by Strickland early in the fight and never regain his rhythm. Izzy's trait from his kickboxing career of not being able to handle defensively sound forward moving strikers reared its ugly head again, and he would lose by unanimous decision while also losing 5 points. Izzy's last fight takes us to the 17th of August 2024 for the main event of UFC 305 Duplessis vs Adesanya, where Izzy would challenge for the middleweight strap against new champion Dricus du Plessis. In a fairly even fight on the scorecards heading into the 4th, Izzy would start to turn it up, but somehow du Plessis, in his typical drunken master Dricus fashion, would somehow find himself catching Izzy in a rear naked choke 3 minutes and 38 seconds into the 4th, and Izzy will lose 7 points. So there we have it, MMA Math predicts Nassourdine Imavov will beat Israel Adesanya. I personally have to disagree with the model's prediction this time. I do think that cardio is going to play a big part in this 5-rounder, especially as one of Izzy's biggest strengths is pacing himself and being extremely efficient in his shot selection, and not to mention he has an unbelievable amount of championship round experience. As for Imavov, his cardio is his most glaring weakness, and if he can't finish it early, I do see Izzy pulling away in the championship rounds. But the fact remains that Izzy's recent form isn't looking too good by his championship standards, and at 35 it will be interesting to see if the middleweight great can hold up physically for another run to the title. I wasn't going to do another fight on this card because Shara Bullet vs MVP simply won't work with this model, as neither fighter has 5 fights in the UFC, but working down to the next fight down on the card, we actually find a really fun heavyweight fight, so let's look at that, where we have 9th ranked Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus 4th ranked Sergei Pavlovich. Starting with Biggie Boy, who will lose 6 points off the bat as he is 36-year-old, but will gain 5 of those points back as he has beat Alistair Overeem, who Pavlovich has previously lost to. 5 fights ago takes us to the 4th of June 2022 for the main event of UFC Fight Night, Volkov vs Rozenstruik, where Rozenstruik, ranked 8, would be put up against 7th ranked Alexander Volkov. Seemingly struggling to deal with the reach advantage of Volkov, Rozenstruik would come out early with some wild combinations. Volkov, however, would remain poised and catch Biggie Boy with a straight right, ultimately finishing the fight via TKO just 2 minutes and 12 seconds into the first. Biggie Boy will lose 12 points for this loss. 4 fights ago takes us to the 10th of December 2022 for UFC 282 Blachowicz vs Ankalev, where Biggie Boy, now ranked 9, would be given 11th ranked Chris Dukakis. In a much needed bounce back for Rozenstruik, he would catch Dukakis early with some heavy strikes and not let off, finishing him in just 23 seconds and earning 10 points. 3 fights ago takes us to the 13th of May 2023 for the main event of UFC Fight Night Rozenstruik vs Almeida, where Biggie Boy, still ranked 9, would be given the 12th ranked heavyweight Jairzinho Almeida. In a bit of a breakout performance for Almeida, he would absolutely storm through Biggie Boy, securing a takedown early and working his way into a rear naked choke just 3 minutes and 43 seconds into the fight. Rozenstruik will lose 17 points for this fight. 2 fights ago for Rozenstruik takes us to the 2nd of March 2024 for the main event of UFC Fight Night Rozenstruik vs Gaziev, where Biggie Boy, now ranked 12, will be given the unranked heavyweight GOAT Shamil Gaziev. In honestly a bit of a mismatch, Biggie Boy will essentially 1-2 Gaziev for 4 rounds, until ref Mark Goddard and Gaziev's corner will awkwardly end the fight at the end of the 4th. Biggie Boy will gain 5.5 points for this victory. Rozenstruik's last fight takes us to the 17th of August 2024 for UFC 305 Duplessis vs Adesanya, where Rozenstruik, now ranked 12, will be given the 10th ranked Tai Tuivasa. In a fairly comfortable victory for Biggie Boy, this fight would be marked by arguably the worst single scorecard in UFC history, with one judge giving every round to Tuivasa. It can't be overstated just how bad this scorecard really was, and it doesn't help that this fight was taking place in Tuivasa's backyard. Unfortunately, this means Biggie Boy will be given the split decision victory and only gain 4 points. Okay, with Rozenstruik out of the way, let's move on to the number 4 ranked contender, Sergei Pavlovich, who will gain 5 points off the bat as he has beat Curtis Blaydes, who Rozenstruik has lost to prior. 5 fights ago for Sergei takes us to the 30th of July 2022 for UFC 277 Pena vs Nunes 2, when 11th ranked Sergei will be given the 5th ranked Derek Lewis. Sergei would tag Lewis early and drop him. Ref Herb Dean would step in slightly early in hindsight at just 55 seconds, but not as bad of a stoppage as many would suggest. Sergei will gain 16 points for this victory. 4 fights ago takes us to the 3rd of December 2022 for UFC Fight Night Thompson vs Holland, where Sergei, ranked 5th, would take on 4th ranked Tai Tuivasa. In another quick finish for Sergei, he would need just 54 seconds this time to finish Tai, landing heavy shots, dropping him twice, and finishing him off with ground strikes, earning 17 points. 3 fights ago for Sergei takes us to the 22nd of April 2023 for the main event of UFC Fight Night Pavlovich vs Blaydes, where now 3rd ranked Sergei would take on 4th ranked Curtis Blaydes. Yet again, Sergei's heavy hands would put away his opponent in the first round, this time taking just 3 minutes and 8 seconds to again drop Blaydes and finish him off with ground and pound. Sergei will gain another 17 points and an extra 3 as this is where his finish streak will end. 2 fights ago for Sergei takes us to the 11th of November 2022 for the co-main event of UFC 295 Prochazka vs Pereira, where Sergei would challenge for the interim heavyweight title against 4th ranked Tom Aspinall. Still allergic to getting out of the first round, the script would flip on Sergei and Aspinall would catch the Russian early, dropping him and finishing him with a right hook and hammer fist on the ground. Just 1 minute and 9 seconds into the first, Sergei will lose 10 points for this loss. Sergei's last fight takes us to the 22nd of June 2024 for the co-main event of UFC Fight Night Whitaker vs Aliskirov, where 3rd ranked Sergei would take on his former training partner and 5th ranked Alexander Volkov. In the first fight in the UFC for Sergei that would leave the first round, Volkov would outclass Sergei, landing more volume and damaging strikes. On his way to winning every round on 2 judges' scorecards in a unanimous decision victory, Sergei will lose 5 points for this loss. So there we have it, MMA Math predicts Sergei Pavlovich will beat Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Hard to disagree with this one on paper. This is either a 1-round slugfest that could go either way, or a bit of a slogwatch heavyweight point fight. Doubt it lands somewhere in the middle. Sergei is coming in as a pretty heavy favourite, especially for heavyweight, so it would seem the market agrees with this prediction. Thank you all for making it to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to leave a like, it helps me out a bunch. Leave a comment below if you think MMA Math has it right this time, and I'll see you all in the next video.